It's great to see you today. This is Living Power, your online Bible study. We are walking through the Bible in a year, and today we're looking at the book of Ezekiel. And boy, is it getting good. There are some real treasures in the reading today that I want to share with you. I'm so glad you've joined me, and I'm so glad that you have committed to studying the Word in its entirety, cover to cover, Old and New Testaments, this year. This reading today in Ezekiel chapter 5 to chapter 9 contains a number of different things. We're actually going to break down each chapter today, and I'm going to try to help you to be able to pull something out from each one. The siege of Jerusalem, we're told today, is going to be divided into thirds. It says a third of the people, this is going to happen. A third of the people, something else is going to happen, and the last third, something completely else is going to happen. Basically, during the siege, a third of the people in Jerusalem will die. Famine will get them, disease will get them, or even wild animals could get them. The second third, another third of the people will be killed at war. And then the last third of the people will be exiled. So you see, not everyone is saved and exiled out. There are a third of the people that are exiled out. And we can understand that what's happening is that sin is causing their downfall. There is a change of thinking in chapter 7, Ezekiel chapter 7. When you read this long discourse from Ezekiel, this is the message that came to me from the Lord. It reads sort of like a poem, and you have to say, what is the gist of it all? The gist of it all is that the Babylonian philosophy is anti-God. And God wants His kingdom principles to be evident in Jerusalem, in His land, just as He does in our country today. The change in thinking in chapter 7 is that people need to stop loving their money. People need to stop pursuing the gods of materialism. And money will not be able to even buy food in the land when the famine comes. And boy, God will be able to really change the way that the people are thinking, and the gods that they are chasing after, everything will change. Chapter 8 to 11 is one vision. We don't actually read all of that today, but today and tomorrow you will. Chapter 8 is one vision. 14 months after the first vision is Ezekiel's second vision. So it comes over a year later. Chapter 8 is about the wickedness of the people in Jerusalem. Chapter 9 is about the slaughter of the people. Chapter 10, God is leaving. We will see Him actually, His presence leaving the temple. That's tomorrow. And chapter 11, the judgment on the rulers, that's also tomorrow. But I just wanted to kind of give you a bird's eye view to encapsulate the whole vision, because it does span these 4 chapters. The wickedness of the people in Jerusalem is shared in Ezekiel 8. I love it that God explains Himself. He doesn't have to. He's God. He can just wipe the people out, do it in a holy, righteous way. His judgments are pure. But He bends down to explain to us exactly what it is that was wrong and why. I just love that about our God. Here He is saying, through Ezekiel, He gives Ezekiel a vision. Now, where is Ezekiel when he has this vision? Ezekiel is in his home. It's almost like a home Bible study. During a home Bible study, it says here in verse 1 of chapter 8, while the leaders of Judah were in my home, the sovereign Lord took hold of me. This is what I like to call Ezekiel's inside ministry. God hadn't really launched him out just yet. But he'd been doing a couple of things, in the first year, but this is his second year of ministry, and God still got him kind of in his home. I love that, his inside ministry. He transports him in a vision back to Jerusalem, and he is supposed to, of course, speak to the people and tell the people what he's seeing. But this is what he's seeing. It's amazing. He's taken him kind of behind the scenes, behind the curtains, and he goes a couple of places in Jerusalem. First of all, they're at the altar in the temple, and evidently there is an idol in the temple of the Lord, and it's making God very jealous, and that is in verse 5. And then, go in is the command from the Lord. Ezekiel goes into the temple. What do you suppose he sees inside the temple? It says, he went in and he saw the walls engraved with all kinds of crawling animals and detestable creatures, probably the unclean animals. These were probably pictures of the unclean animals. I also saw, Ezekiel said, the various idols worshipped by the people of Israel. So there are other idols inside the temple. 70 leaders of Israel were standing there, and each were burning incense. First of all, remember from the Torah, there were only certain people supposed to burn incense, so they weren't even following the rules correctly. The 70 leaders is prophetic, it's symbolic. There were 70 members of the Sanhedrin in the New Testament, and there were 70 members under Moses that were called to help bring justice and sort of judge the cases brought to Moses. Remember when Moses' father-in-law came and says, you're going to wear yourself out. You need to appoint some people as leaders over these people. So I believe this 70 here kind of is important. It means something to us. The 70 leaders of Israel were burning incense. Could it possibly mean that these practices were just representative of the entire nation and the entire population? Then we see at the north gate of the Lord's temple, women. It wasn't just men, women were in the game too. They were weeping. What were they weeping over? They were weeping for the god Tammuz. Now here's the deal with Tammuz. This is a Hebrew name for a Sumerian god. This is a false god. It's the deity of spring vegetation. And the vegetation, when the vegetation dies in the summer, when the winter comes, it was believed through mythology that this god Tammuz went into the underworld. In the spring, she came back, and that's why everything started to grow again. There were also fertility rites involved in her worship, and it was customary for the women to start to weep and to grieve and to mourn at the changing of the season, when the fall was starting to come, and the winter. This is what they were doing. They were practicing this rite of worship for this foreign god. Then, that's not all. Ezekiel saw 25 men in verse 16 worshiping the sun. For them to be worshiping at this time the sun, their backs had to be in the temple, but their backs were to the Holy of Holies. This is not how God wanted to be worshipped. We were to face, wherever direction, wherever you were to face Jerusalem and face the Lord. You know, I think it's true even when someone today goes to visit the Queen of England, that they are not to turn their backs on her. When they exit, they are to back up so that they are always forward facing her. So this was just standard practice, but these men worshiping the sun had their backs to the Holy of Holies. They were worshiping out the east gate, and so not only was their posture wrong, but it was a command in Deuteronomy 4:19 not to worship the stars, the sun, or the moon, and here they were doing that. So, unfortunately, judgment, it was time for judgment. God has presented He's presented His case and laid everything bare. He's kept nothing hidden. And it is time for judgment. And we're taken to Ezekiel chapter 9. Very interesting thing to be seen here in Ezekiel chapter 9. The Lord is thundering. His anger is at a peak. He is ready to bring justice. And there is a man dressed in linen. It's not a capital M. We don't know who this is. It could very well, some scholars believe it's an angel of the Lord. But he is coming and he is carrying a deadly weapon. This deadly weapon is a writer's case. For all of you writers out there that are part of this Bible study, had you ever thought that your writer's case, your pen, could be a deadly weapon for good in the hands of the Lord? This deadly weapon is a method of salvation, not a tool that brings judgment. For inside this writer's case is a pen in which this Son of Man will write protection on the foreheads of everyone in the city who is righteous. And what is the action that this Son of Man, this angel perhaps, is supposed to be looking for so that he can distinguish the righteous from the wicked? Interestingly enough, it is found in Ezekiel 9 verse 4. Put a mark on all the foreheads of all who weep and sigh because of the detestable sins being committed in their city. The intercessors, the ones who are actively interceding and praying for the wicked and praying for the despicable practices that are happening in the nation, are the ones that will be saved. Are you an intercessor? Can you see the command here that is being given to all of us to pray for our nations? We are not to falter in our intercession and praying for our president, our rulers, our nation, the people in the nation, our country, our cities, our schools. Have we forgotten to be intercessors for the people around us? Have we forgotten to pray for our country? It says, kill everyone whose forehead is not marked. For this weapon, this writer's case, will mark on the foreheads of all the intercessors to save their life. You see, the mark is what will save them. You know, during the tribulation, here's some notes for those of you that have an eschatology notebook. During the tribulation, there will also be a seal, and the Antichrist will put a mark, try to put a mark, a physical mark on the people, and it will mark them to eternal damnation. At that time, there will also be a mark, a seal that cannot be seen to anyone but believers, and it will be a mark on the foreheads of the believers that live through the tribulation period, that period of 7 years where Antichrist will have his heyday and the judgment upon the nations, the day of the Lord, will come. God is, of course, sovereign through those 7 years, that 7-year period, and he will mark and seal his treasured possession. In Revelation, it talks about the 144,000. That's a prophetic number that we'll get to and in the course of our study, and we'll talk about at a little later time. But I just want you to understand that the concept of being sealed and being marked, either for God or for Satan, is a very real and physical. It's a symbol, but it's actually something that is also very real. We want to be marked for the Lord. We want to be sealed unto Him, protected unto Him for His purposes and for His glory. Notice there is no age distinction. Man, woman, children, it just doesn't matter. It begins at the sanctuary and it spreads out across the entire nation. The people that will be saved will be the ones that are interceding, praying for the nation, praying for the people, those that grieve and mourn over the sin that they see around them. So here's the application for us today. Have we become so immersed in our culture of Babylon that we just don't even see the sin anymore? Do we, when we see reality TV and we read books that are just so full of the Babylonian culture, the me mentality, the I am myself, the humanness, the human nature around us, that we just don't even seem to care? It just doesn't seem to bother us anymore. Well, if you're in that position where it just doesn't seem to bother you anymore, you need to heed the warning that comes from Ezekiel 9. Because God is always constantly looking for an intercessor, someone that will pray to intercede for the sins of the people. And certainly in our day, in America, the culture of Babylon is rampant, and it is going strong, and it is up to us. The message here today is it is up to us to distance ourselves from that culture, to see it what it is, to intercede and pray for the sins of the people around us. Each person's destiny is determined by their character here in Ezekiel 9. The actions, have they allowed themselves to become ingrained into the culture, or do they separate themselves and keep themselves holy and pure unto the kingdom principles rather than the Babylonian principles? Certainly that is a challenge for us today in our day and age. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this lesson today. This concludes these chapters in Ezekiel. Tomorrow we'll continue to read about Ezekiel in chapters 10 and 11, and we will see the glory of the Lord. Oh, such a sad sight, depart from the holy temple of Israel. You want to spend some time there for sure. Well, blessings to you and your family until we meet again. Shalom.